Okay, so I'm sharing my screen, and what you can see is a Foucault's pendulum. And this Foucault's pendulum is in the Harris Museum in Preston, Lancashire, where I was born and brought up. And I spent so many happy hours full of love, learning about art, learning about science during my childhood. And the Harris has just had a 17 million pound restoration, and the Foucault's pendulum has been restored to its glory. And it seems like a very appropriate symbol for talking about the geometry of love, given that I spent so much time there, absolutely loving the place. So before I just really get started, I want to recreate that sense of beautiful stillness that we had during our opening meditation, for which I thank you. And I want us to feel the coherence. I want us to feel us all coming together, because before the motion of the pendulum starts, there has to be a stillness. And when I talk about the geometry of love, which is something that came to me fairly recently as a concept, as the way that I feel, the way I think, the way I talk about love. And it began, as so many of these discoveries do, in a moment of stillness and reflection. So the pendulum really just has one job, and that's to reveal the invisible architecture, the perpetual motion that keeps us all going, that keeps our world going, that keeps our universe going. And there's an invisible architecture that holds us as people. And that, to me, is the invisible architecture of love. And that's what love does. That's what love does. It holds us. I have love as a structural principle that holds us as people and that holds organizations in cohesion, just as geometry itself gives strength to architecture. Now, when I talk about love, I talk about not sentimental love, but love as structural intelligence. And I want us to really feel that, the structural intelligence of love that is present in all our lives. So this moving into a different kind of coherence. This is a photograph taken from my garden. And I find that the clouds here forming this beautiful display, they're a kind of natural coherence that keeps us, well, sunsets they inspire us all the time. They keep us spellbound. And in this one, I just love the plumes of the clouds holding together. And it's just a flow of coherence. It's the flow of how a coherent sky, a coherent sunset is. And again, our sunsets are kind of an invisible organizing principle. And as people, we're the same. We have an organizing principle. Teams have organizing principles, and leadership also has organizing principles. So when I speak about love in leadership, I'm speaking of this structural intelligence. It's the capacity of a system or a person to hold integrity, to adapt without collapse, and to generate that coherence. Often a surprise occurs and we fall out of coherence. And then another surprise occurs, and that brings us back into coherence. And by holding love at the center, love, which isn't something soft, it's something very, very strong. It's, if you could imagine love as being the load thing. If you can't always see the load bearing beam, but it's there holding things together, holding us together through our heart, through our spirit, through our soulful love. So you can paint the facade in any color you like. You can paper over the cracks. But if that load-bearing beam of that central love that we feel is not present, then that facade is not going to last very long. And this often happens with leadership. It often happens when we're not truly centered in love, when we're not feeling that strength. We fall apart at the least disturbance. And disturbances will come along. They always come along. Just as we often feel that life is flowing smoothly, some unexpected comet arrives out of the blue and throws us off course. But if we recenter in love, we can hold together. We can hold together with that deep love as structural intelligence. And it applies so strongly to a leadership that's based on love. And this is a completely different type of sky where Ilya Prigozhin, Nobel Prize-winning chemist, talks about small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos. And again, this is the sky outside my home here in southwest France. And if we think about how these small islands of coherence appear in our lives, we don't need to change the whole organization at once. We don't need to change the whole system at once. If we can see, if we can feel, if we can hold these islands of coherence in the sea of chaos, where a lot of our world, a lot of lives at this time are really feeling disruption, feeling things falling apart, and how to bring them back together. We need to have single spaces, and collaboration global for sure is one of the spaces where we are bringing people, we are bringing ideas, we are bringing difference. We're celebrating difference and bringing people together in a place that's safe, that's seen and trusted and respected. Because coherence attracts coherence, and that coherence propagates. And I move on now to Teilhard de Chardin, who's one of my favorite people, a biologist, a philosopher. And there are a lot of quotes that are famous for him. There's one about man rediscovering fire, or rediscovering love, I beg your pardon. And for that, in that time when we rediscover love as human beings, we will have rediscovered fire for the second time. But this quote here, love is the only force that can make things one without destroying them. No other force can integrate without harming. Fear fractures and things fall apart. The power that can dominate in leadership, things fall apart. We're not in the era where power should be the prime, the command, and the control. We're in an era where servant leadership, service, and caring and love need to be at the center. And whatever we can do to restore that, to reinforce that, will change our world. So love, and real love that brings things together without breaking their individuality. That's the heart of coherence, which is the heart of love. And love and coherence together, they work. So I'd like to move on now to the 7 principles of the geometry of love. Trust is crucially important, and trust is one of the things that is quite challenging. It's quite challenging for leaders, because I was in a conversation with someone who I think is one of Gill's heroes, Ricardo Semler, and he said to me, trust's a big problem, because leaders think their people should trust them, but they don't want to trust their people. And if you haven't got the reciprocity of trust, if you can't trust your people, if you can't trust yourself, but you expect other people to trust you, then that isn't true trust. That's an expectation that you are the one to be trusted, that you're in charge. But everybody else, well, maybe you can't trust them. And this is something that I've actually had 2 questions this week from people I know well. One of whom is a mentee, and the questions are very similar. They were about I really need to share the enormity of my business, the enormity of what I've achieved in my life, but I haven't found anyone yet that I could really trust to do that. And so we have this question again of, how do you trust yourself? How do you create that immense universal kind of love for yourself that allows you to trust, and allows you therefore to trust that other people not only trust you, but that you can trust them? Giving the benefit of the doubt, allowing for humanity, allowing for the fact that we all do make mistakes, but to give people enough love, to show them enough love, that not only do they trust you, but that you foster that kind of trusting love in their hearts, that they will join you in that place of trust. And this leads us to congruence and the coming together of, do you do what you say you're going to do? Do you follow through on your promises? Are you congruent? Do you give off love? Do you know how to be love? Do you know how to generate that feeling that Gill was talking about at the beginning, where we come together with that sense of purpose and that sense of being together, that we're congruent as individuals and the place that we occupy in society and in whatever our role in life may be. And again, reciprocity is, do you wait until you feel someone loves you, or do you love anyway? One of the things that I've discovered in the interviews that I've done for my work on love in the boardroom, for which I've interviewed over 70 leaders, ranging from the Dalai Lama to Vince Cable when he was the Minister for Business in the British government, Dan Pink, the author, Edward de Bono, sadly passed away, but a vast range of people, that is there that reciprocity in your leadership? Is there a willingness to accept that other people have something to give? And can you be love without expecting anything in return? Because if you can cross that chasm to being love, I've had to do it so many times. I used to joke about having to step into the marble halls of the granite men when I was doing these interviews. And I had to anticipate that there would be some reciprocity, that I would find a way to communicate, and that people would feel what I was giving out and give some of that back to me. And invariably, there was reciprocity. There's compassion, there's psychological safety, there's presence. Presence, what is presence? What is presence? Really being settled in yourself and having that self-belief that again comes back to trust. You trust yourself and you trust others. And in that kind of presence comes the sovereignty that enables you to truly command love within yourself and without, wherever that may be, whether you know what the outcome is going to be or not. And this is a poem about presence. I did a course on leadership through horse whispering. And this was the photo here with the horse who is quite an elderly horse who had arthritis. And I was expected to put him through paces without any tools whatsoever to help me. So what I was told when I couldn't get him to move at all, couldn't get him to do anything, was that I was going to have to be a little bit more important, a little bit more interesting than the grass he was sniffing and the dung that he was very interested in. So I had to be, learn how to be a bit more important, a bit more influential, and have more presence. So at first sight, my heart sank. This obsidian-eyed talisman was so dense, so impenetrable, immovable, obdurate beast, still, silent, dignified. The first touch, he was solid, intransigent, eroding my faith, opaquely dulling my senses. And so I started to think, and to sink my thoughts to him, to communicate to him. Those thoughts brought a flicker, a twitching hoof, a trembling knee, a searching gaze, the first sound of silence, thoughts flooding, comfort disturbed, connecting, interest, feeling love, faith restored. Leading now, he moved, the first move. There was such a powerful surge between us, and we were trusting, moving forward, circling, weaving. He followed me. Clarity was the answer, and belief was the core, because I got really, really clear about what I wanted to happen, which was that I wanted him to follow me. And I believed that I was someone worth following. And that led to the result that I wanted. And I think this applies to leadership, to our lives throughout. Now, this is an interesting story. This is from an interview from my work with the CEO of a chain of jewelers, British retailers who have about 70 branches. And he was somewhat skeptical about love as a presence at work. He could cope with kindness and compassion, but love, he said, love for me, Christine, is only for my family. I can't see love really being present in work. By the time we got to the end of the conversation, which was supposed to be 40 minutes, and 2.5 hours later, we parted company. And he'd come round somewhat to my thoughts about love being present all the time and love being a crucial component of leadership and love at work. He telephoned me about 3 or 4 months later, and he said, Christine, I had to call you. I was just in one of our branches and they're virtually at the bottom of the league, failing, really badly failing. And the manageress was beside herself. And I didn't know what to do, he said. What else can I do to help? And all of a sudden, your words came into my mind. And I said to her, I know. Why don't you try love? Why don't you try loving yourself, loving the staff, loving the store itself, and most of all, offering love to the customers who come in? And what happened? As I say, he called about 3 or 4 months later, really excited. And from the bottom quartile of the 70 branches, that branch had gone up to number 30. And the manager was beside herself with joy. And takeaway phrase that came out of that was, she said to her boss, I'll tell you something, this love stuff really works. And I couldn't have asked for a more telling response. And obviously it was music to my ears and joy to my heart. So that is, it's a fabulous result. It's wonderful. And this next slide, when I went in to see Terry Lee here at Tesco, he's a very cool character, very, very, he had to have something very special about him to achieve all that he'd achieved in his life. But very, very cool and slightly reluctant, possibly the most skeptical and most challenging interview that I've done out of all of them. And so he said very categorically, I'm not prepared to talk about love in my life. I'm not prepared to accept that there's a place for love in business. I'll talk to you about care and compassion, but I'm not going to talk to you about love. So, okay, we can change the terminology. To me, care, compassion, kindness, they include love. Love includes all of these things. So let's talk about how you lead. And towards the end of the conversation, we found that we were beginning to have some kind of agreement. And his parting shot to me, as you see here, is, Christine, you're onto something big here. Keep going. And again, this was, he recognized that there is a breaking apart in leadership, that there's a struggle. And I would feel that from the number of years ago that I interviewed him, the struggle for leaders is even greater now to bring coherence back into their organizations, especially after COVID. Engagement is at an all-time low. And so in this instance, love it's not just a nice idea, it's a real strategic advantage. And this is a very, very, very personal thing. What you can see are pick lines. I had a very serious illness at the beginning of this year and ended up in intensive care for 12 days. Mm-hmm. And I had to keep going. I had to keep reminding myself that no matter how uncomfortable the situation was, no matter how clinical, how cold and how challenging I found the hospital environment, these were my lifelines. The nurses the doctors, had a job to do, and they were my lifelines as well. And that it was during that time, that 12 days, that I decided that I was coming back from this, that I decided that love mattered more than anything in my life, that I was feeling it in different ways, and that it was time for me to decide what really matters and to resurrect myself and come back. So this is love, not as abstraction, not as theory. It's love as structure and as a breath. And love was my lifeline.
Bless you. Thank you, Christine. That's a beautiful place to leave it. I'm not sure if you're quite finished, but we are running short on time, so I'm going to have to interrupt you slightly there. Did you have a question for our breakout rooms for people to consider? If not, I can get one.
No, I think we had two questions.
Brilliant.
The first one is, I can just leave the slide, but what does love look, sound, or feel like when expressed as coherence in your daily actions or work? And how can we design organizations and intelligences that harmonize with life rather than control it?
Right. That's perfect. Thank you. Alan is busily putting people into groups now of 3. There should be a Collaboration Global member in with you, and that Collaboration Global member will make sure that everybody has a fair slice of the time. We're going to do just 10 minutes now, I'm afraid, guys. Sorry. But it was so good to listen to what Christine had to say, and I'm sure there's even more, which we could have had. Maybe we'll have to have a back for part 2. But consider those questions. What does love look like and feel like when expressed as coherence in your daily actions or work? Where do you see love in your world? And how can we design organizations and intelligences that harmonize with life rather than try to control it? Something to ponder. Okay. Christine, if you would stop your share now, and then Alan can send people off into their rooms, that would be lovely.